Well, hello there. Today we are going to talk about everything I read for the month of April. So let's get into it. The first book for this month that I read was Ghost Music by Owen. And this book was real weird, kind of like David Lynchian vibes going on, being in a room with no doors, glowing mushroom on the floor, talking to you. So the story follows this woman who is a pianist growing up, and that's kind of like what she was gonna go into, but then instead ended up getting married and kind of still, teaches piano and whatnot, but kind of gave up her dream, it seems like. And she's living with her husband, who's a workaholic. His mom moves in, so she's living with the stepmother, and then they start getting these mysterious packages that have all these mushrooms in them, and they're not really sure where they're coming from, and it's really weird, and it's such a trippy and crazy book. I like stuff that has just, a little out of the unusual kind of vibe, and that definitely fit into the category for sure. The next thing I read was The London Seance Society by Sarah Penner, and this was just a fun kind of mystery type book about, well, the London Seance Society. And also there was this really great spiritualist, Vaudeline de Lair, and I never say her name right. I don't think that's how it's said. I don't know. Vaudeline. And then the London Seance Society, which is this seance society, and it's all made up of men. There's been a lot of controversy going around about this because there's rumors that they're faking stuff and this, that, and the other. It seems like there's some bad men in the society that need to be weeded out and get them out of there. And so the guy who runs the place, it looks like he was investigating into that to figure out who it was. He winds up dead. And so they call in Vaudeline to come and do a seance to figure out who killed him, what happened, and all that good stuff. And it was just a fun read. The next thing I read was one of the most deranged books I've read in quite some time. I would say it made it into my top 5 of out there and deranged books, but I really liked it. It felt like one day it could possibly be like a weird cult classic, and it is called Letters to the Editor of Cthulhu Sex Magazine, written by Oliver Bear. It's such a wild and tentacular book. I have a review for it. I will put a link down below if you're interested in checking that out. It just, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird, man. There's letters to the editor, and then there's letters from the editor, and then different people write in, and then you have like some of the other key players who are involved in this magazine that put it out and whatnot, and just really weird, right in my wheelhouse. It was tentacular. So the next thing that I read was Our Own Unique Affliction by Scott J. Moses. This is a vampire book, and it's put out by Darklit Press. It was absolutely fantastic. It had a really unique kind of perspective on the vampire story, and then also how in the story, like how the humans and vampires kind of had this mutual existence, sort of. I mean, the ones that knew about their existence, but it was not to say the most healthiest. And then there's some weird stuff that starts happening. It has these like hallucinogenic dreamlike qualities to it. The ending was really touching and moving, and that is all I'll say about it because I don't want to give away any spoilers if you do choose to read it. And I also have a standalone review for that, which I'll link down below as well. Then I read The Adventures of Amina El-Sarafi by S.A. Chakraborty, and this is a swashbuckling pirate adventure, and it is awesome. It is a lot of fun. It's going to be a trilogy. It's about this woman, Amina El-Sarafi, and she had been retired for quite some time, lived with her daughter and her mom, and they're just trying to live like this quiet life. But the sea, it always calls these people, whether they're sailors or pirates. They say that when you're a pirate or a sailor or a captain, your first love is the sea, so it never lets its tentacles off of you, She signs up for one last adventure. It becomes so much more than she bargained for. This really wealthy lady contacts her and is like, hey, my granddaughter was kidnapped. If you bring her back, I'm gonna give you this ridiculous amount of money. Family will be set for life, this, that, and the other. And she's like, well, it sounds decent enough. But the further she gets into the adventure, the more hard and more ridiculous it becomes. And it's insane. Something about Adventures at Sea. I like waterscape fiction or fantasy or books that have to do with like themes that are water. Recently I've been reading a few of them, whether it's a book like this or a book that has to do with aquatic life or creatures, octopuses and whatnot. This was a super fun book. I really liked it. There was great adventures. I like the crew, I like the characters, and I can't wait to see what happens in the next book. And then I read The Hero, the Fear, and the Date by author Rod Gilly, and it's just a short little novella with 3 different stories that are kind of weird and wacky, and just something real fun that if you had about an hour, you could read it real quick. It is a fun little book. So then, I'm a big fan of haunted house stories. So anytime there's a book that is a haunted house story, if it's up and coming and it sounds kind of interesting, I'm going to try to read it and fit it into my schedule. So I kept seeing everywhere The Spite House by Johnny Compton. So it follows the story of Eric, the main character, and his 2 daughters, and they're kind of like on the run, but not because of a crime or anything. It's a weird situation of what happened. It goes kind of into like stuff that happened in Eric's family history, but you won't really discover that until you get deeper into the book. So as you get deeper into it, you find out why they're on the run. And so he's taking jobs that pay mainly cash, and he finds this job to basically go to this haunted house, which is one of the most haunted houses in Texas, and just observe what happens. And the pay is really, really good. They could stop being on the move, they could settle down, possibly get a house. This could be really like a game changer for them. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. The house is haunted AF. It is super haunted. The last people that were there before them, they went kind of crazy. It seems like the house just steals pieces of people and doesn't let it go. And what happens with like the owner who owns it and why she wants people to come and do this. It was a really great haunted house story. It was kind of weird and different. Next, I read The Vile Thing We Created by Robert Atone. This book, I picked it up because he runs Spooky House Press, another indie pub where it has great books, awesome authors, and he put out a book. So I was very curious to check out the publisher's book because, you know, he's publishing these other authors and they're pretty great. And so I was very, like, curiosity, like a cat. I didn't really have any kind of expectation for this book. I assumed, you know, you run a publishing company, you probably love books and love to read and are in that and whatnot. And he's written other books too, which I didn't know until finding out about this book. It is a story of when parenting goes horribly wrong. It follows these 2 characters, Ian and Lola. All their friends are having kids and their friends don't invite them anywhere anymore, and they're kind of starting to feel left out, and they're like, should we like have a kid? I don't know, is it gonna change everything? Because there's like this kind of like cool and hip couple. Anyway, they decide to have a kid. You know, it's the trope of the hell child, or the kid with psychic phenomena happening around him, or the kid with just really weird stuff going on that demented things happen. And it was such a wild read, and I absolutely loved it. There were so many different elements to the story that were just really weird, pulling in like these strange things in the woods. The mom, who was kind of an a-hole for Ian's whole life. Oh yeah, and Lola is a black woman, and the mom was kind of racist, so they didn't really talk to her for a really long time. But all of a sudden, they're having a kid, and the mom is all nicey nice and saying she wants to change, and this, that, and the other. All kinds of suspicious stuff is happening, and it was awesome. Okay, and then I read probably my favorite, absolute favorite book this month that I read. I read a lot of really great ones. I read one that really sucked. We'll get to that one. And then most were great. This is my absolute favorite. Freaking awesome. Boys in the Valley, Philip Fracassi. And I've been yelling about Philip Fracassi now for a while. I was first turned on to him by the Jeff Word, another awesome booktuber. I'll put a link to his channel down below. He's freaking great. So Philip Fracassi's book, Boys in the Valley, this comes out July 11th. It's my favorite book of his yet. This is the 3rd one I've read. I've read Gothic and A Child Alone with Strangers, and this one far surpassed anything I could have imagined. It's so good. It was a dark and stormy night, and there's these kids who live in this orphanage, all boys. It's back in the 1800s. They're brought up by these priests. One of them is a good dude, the one's just really old, and the other one's kind of an a-hole. One night, bad stuff comes to the door. A man dies there, and then demons are unleashed into the orphanage. People start taking sides, stuff starts getting real weird, and it's about who survives. It's about questioning your faith, what is right, what is wrong, and there's so much in it. It's so emotional, and it was just, it was so good. I cannot state enough how good it was. Boys in the Valley, Philip Fracassi, you have to read it. It's so good. Then I read T. Kingfisher's newest, A House with Good Bones, another haunted house story. That story was wild. There's so much weird stuff going on in it, and it's now probably my favorite T. Kingfisher that I've read. This is the 3rd one I've read. read Nettle and Bones, and I also read What Moves the Dead, and then this one, A House with Good Bones. It's weird. In the neighborhood, there's vultures just hanging out, and they roost down the street in this neighbor's tree. Across the street, this guy who thinks the government's after him and everyone else. Samantha, she returns home to go live with her mom, and her brother's like, Mom has been real weird. Something ain't right. And she's an archaeoentomologist, so she's an archaeologist that studies bugs. So when they do archaeological digs, she goes through the dirt layers, sees what kind of insects were around at that time and whatnot. But the dig is canceled currently, so she's gonna go live with her mom because she sublet her apartment and she doesn't have anywhere to stay. And yeah, something is not right with her mother. Her mom was always like vivacious and liberal and just, not seemingly frightened all the time. And now she painted all the walls ecru or beige or eggshell, and so everything's boring. She hung up this racist Confederate wedding painting in the living room that she had torn off the wall, and like Samantha thought that her mama got rid of it. And then she seems to like freak out when anyone talks bad about Grand May, the grandmother. And then there's all this stuff you can do, like the family history, and like the dad of Grand May was like the mad wizard of Boone, and then ladybug infestations and Thelema weird stuff, and how Grand May was just mean old broad, and she would scare the kids, or she would tell them if they didn't behave, the underground children were gonna get them, and there's just a lot of weird stuff that's going on, and it's a great haunted house story. The end is freaking bananas. If you like T. Kingfisher, or if you haven't heard anything of T. Kingfisher, and you like haunted houses, House of Good Bones is awesome. Then we read Such Pretty Flowers by K.L. Sarah. This book is a horror book. So it follows the story of this girl, and her brother ends up dead. There's suspicions around his ex-girlfriend. She does floral arrangements and this, that, and the other. And there's all this weird stuff. And so the sister of the brother who passed away kind of like is like, I want to find out what happened. I don't believe that how he died was right, and it seems really messed up, and some of the text messages he had sent her before he died were real effed up. It's kind of like this weird, creepy thing that pulls in plant life and botany and poisonous things and hallucinative things, and I don't want to get too into it. Just like a modern day poison ivy story. I don't know. But not like super overly like feed me Seymour type plants. More like subtle in the usage of them, not really in super fantastical ways, but just a little bit. It was wild, and it was really good. I think I read it in like a day. The writing was super addictive. You wanted to know what was happening next. It was pretty demented. Beautiful cover. Just a really good book. And it was like keeping with that theme. The next thing I read was Tripping Arcadia by Kit Mayquist, and this had a theme around also about like plants and poisonous things, and it follows the story of the main character. Her father ends up losing his job and he gets injured, and so she needs to help out with the family because they're not making that much money, and he's got all these medical bills, and she ends up getting this job with this really rich, well-to-do family. And what turns out and happens is that the patriarch of the family is the one that's kind of responsible for firing her dad and whatever else happened to him. This is all in the cover of the book, so I'm not really giving anything away by saying that. They have these parties, and it's just pure debauchery. Just imagine the most depraved, debauched things ever. Drugs, sex, rock and roll, whatever. Tables full of drugs. People doing whatever everywhere. It's all happening. And so the main character, when she finds out about this guy doing this to her family, decides that she will take revenge. And then stuff happens, and it's wild. I really like that book too. It was pretty great. It's a gothic novel. The writing was super addictive. I really liked the characters. It was effed up. It was so effed up, but it was great. Although I still never understood why the title was Tripping Arcadia. Like, I get the tripping part, but what was the Arcadia? Is that somewhere in Massachusetts? Maybe. If anyone knows why the title was that. Usually, like, when you read a book, you figure out the connection to the title, and I could not, outside of the tripping part. Tripping part made sense. Arcadia, I was like, what? Huh? I don't know. Then I read a novelette called I Am I by Ai Jun. This is the second book I've read by this author. She's absolutely lovely, and she wrote another book called Ling Hoon, and that book is also fantastic. I have a standalone review for that, and I will link that down below. This little novelette, it is such an emotionally charged story packed into this tiny tiny little novelette, and it's so good. You can read it in under an hour. It follows like what happens to this person who's a cyborg. Like, what if you could change some of your parts to become more efficient, have better vision, to run faster, to work faster, and all this stuff. And what you think that you want is really not what you need. And then realizing the importance of the people in your lives, even when maybe they are a little annoying, that these are the people in your life that you lean on each other and take care of each other and whatnot. And just how all of these threads came throughout the story, and just this survival in existence and trying to get by. And I can't wait to see what this author does next. And then I read a book called The Curator by Owen King. Don't do it. It's a book about cats that want to go in a door that they need someone to open for them. This book sucks. I don't like to talk bad about books, but here I am talking bad about a book. It had so many different elements where it could have been a really great story, but it was like this plane trying to take off, and you're like, oh, okay, it's getting interesting, and then it would like slam crash into a wall or into the ground. Like, it would have interesting characters, and then they would be gone from the story. It would have these relationships that were crappy relationships that people just never evolved or wanted anything better. And then I didn't care about any of the characters. Really didn't. Why do I care that this brother died? I don't. You never made me care. Like, I was never made to care about anyone or care. And once I started getting interesting, like I said, every time it would like crash into the ground. And so you had all these elements that could have been really cool. There was a lot of cool ideas, but they just like, they didn't braid together. Here's these really demented twin sisters who are horribly evil. Let's bring them into the story for 2 seconds. Here's the main bad guy of the story. Sure, he gets his just desserts, but it's like such a minuscule part that there's no like, I don't know. It was I didn't hate it, but I don't know. It was a story about cats that wanted to go in a door that they couldn't get into by themselves. It could have been a lot shorter of a book. So that is all the books that I read for the month of April. Most of them were pretty great. One of them was absolutely to the moon. And then this one, they can't all be winners. If you're a fan of videos where I talk about multiple things that I'm reading, next video coming up will be about that. So stick around, check it out. And if you had fun hanging out today, hit that subscribe button. Come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.